Sorry, I think one of the verses were off. That's not her fault. By the way, it's mine. But we'll follow along. Sometimes it's little tests. Are you paying attention? What is that verse about? But we're going to be walking through actually a topic that hopefully you'll really get a clear sense along the way. But I usually start with a story just to help us to kind of get engaged and to follow through on what's going on. So I think that's the right one. Yeah, I can't see it. Okay, perfect. Okay, so my cousin lives in Irvine, California, actually right off of Irvine, called a town called Tustin. And he picked me up, and we're driving to his house. And as we're driving from place to place, I don't know if all architects do this, but he was pointing out, look at that feature, look at this, look at that. And he's explaining everything that we're seeing. And I'm like, just got up from a long flight. I'm a little tired. My cousin, who's another cousin who's an architect, did this when I was in Chicago. He's like, see that building? That reveals this kind of building idea where the structure was from the outside and so on and so forth. And I'm like, kind of half zoned out and not paying attention to him, but he was describing something that other people have seen. When you go to Irvine, it's kind of beautiful. It's like, some people call it like a Disneyland feel. It's not just a hodgepodge of this person makes this person makes. There's like this theme going throughout. In fact, he was telling me the building codes, you can't make your building look like something that's outside of the guidelines of the whole town of Irvine, because, and the result is it's kind of pretty, but it's because Irvine is one of the few cities that was actually master planned. In other words, one guy owned the whole town, and ultimately, one group organized the whole town along a master plan. They made sure that 1/3 of the city had green open space and would remain so. They made sure that there'd be businesses that would pay for the taxes. Okay? They made sure that there would be a university that would come and attract a lot of people as well as make the town relevant. And if you kind of think about that, all of this was planned from the beginning. And so Irvine remains one of the safest, every city has issues, but one of the most sustainable, most kind of enjoyable places to live because it was master planned. Right in the 1960s, as people were kind of flooding out of Los Angeles, other towns were just kind of like, okay, we'll just make this a housing project over here. We'll just throw up some houses over there. But they thought and they planned in advance. And you can see the positive benefits even now. Whenever you're doing something incredibly complicated where the stakes are really, really high, planning sometimes makes the difference all the way through. So if you think about what happened in World War II, when the Allies were coming together fighting against Germany, Germany never thought that the Allies would have this kind of connectedness. But a lot of it came from not only interpersonally with the generals, but they planned this through thoughtfully and carefully. They didn't just run in and just throw their soldiers to get killed. They made months-long plans, actually. This is a picture of Operation Overlord, the invasion of Europe through Normandy. So many died, yes, but if it wasn't for this plan, and it didn't go perfectly, but if it wasn't for the plan, in fact, our whole civilization might look different. We might be speaking German. Yeah, this is how great the stakes were, but how significant it is when you got people who are thoughtfully, diligently planning. But it's not just during the war, it was after the war, because this is what Germany looked like after they were bombed and after they lost. And in fact, that's exactly what had happened, and the reason why Germany kind of went and became really belligerent is because out of vengeance, out of anger, out of bitterness, after the last World War, they weren't given any help, and they were told to pay all these reparations. And so kind of like the Nazi regime popped up because nobody planned ahead. And so the United States put into a plan called the Marshall Plan. They poured billions of dollars into reconstructing not only Germany, but also Japan. And that made a huge difference. Who are two of our greatest allies now? It was because somebody put together and followed through on a plan. Our world has a tendency for things to go bad and go ugly. You ever feel that, right? Like everything is going nice, and next thing you know, what happened, right? Out of nowhere. Well, if you're a physicist, you would understand this is the equation, this is the second law of thermodynamics, okay? That usually Something that's energy that's collected will dissipate. Something of structure will actually move toward randomness. That's what entropy is. And ultimately, when there are no planners, guess what takes control? Yeah, entropy. But when there are planners, even against great odds, even when things don't look like it's going to turn out good, oftentimes it's those who not only have a plan, but institute and follow through with it. Makes huge differences. Yeah? Go on a vacation and don't plan it. Okay? Right? Go to Mexico. Okay? It's our neighbor. It's right there. It's so easy. And then find that, wait, there's nowhere to go except Motel 6. Right? And it's nasty. It's got bed bugs. Right? And you don't know which restaurant actually has, decent food, and so you get sick. Right? You don't know which beach to go to because it's kind of dangerous and there's cartels around. Right? The difference between planning a vacation well versus not can be life and death, even a vacation, right? So let me use another example. Let's say it's Valentine's, and you're going on a first date or a second date, and you just really like this person, and it's your job to go ahead and decide where you're going to go, and you kind of say, I'm just going to wing it. Just going to wing it. I like to be spontaneous. This person's going to like me whether they like it or not, and so I'm just going to go ahead and you try to buy some flowers, but everybody's out of flowers, okay? Because what happens at Valentine's? Somebody already reserved it. There's no flowers left to buy when you go, okay? And it's kind of funny. I've seen people do this. So they go to the CVS and buy a gift card, right? Right? Or a box of nasty chocolates, right? Right? And so you don't have any reservations. So if you showed up to a restaurant with your date, they would say, do you have a reservation? I didn't know we needed one, right? So you end up going to McDonald's, right? And you want to go see a show, or you want to go see, but you don't have any tickets, and they're all sold out, so you come home and you watch Netflix, right? Some date, right? Well, this actually happens when you get older, okay? And it's been 10 years, and it's Valentine's, and you're busy, you got kids, and your spouse, especially if you're the one who's supposed to be planning, is expecting something, and you got no flowers, a gift card, and McDonald's and Netflix. Guess what happens? Right? What does that mean? It means the lack of planning means the lack of care, the lack of love, right? When somebody really loves you, what do? They go out of their way to plan thoughtfully, sometimes intricately. There's a story of a father who did all kinds of wonderful, trips and surprises for their family and the kids growing up. They just thought it was just kind of like the father was being spontaneous. Then they found his journal, and in his journal were all the specific, intricate plans for each of these events, each of these experiences that he brought his children through. And as they were thinking about their dad, their perspective shifted. Wow, Dad planned like this for us. He took this much time, this much care, and invested these resources to give us these memories, to give us this life. A good father plans, okay? A good lover plans. A good teacher plans. A good pastor plans, yeah? In fact, you don't know this, but, yes, we do sermon series, but the plans and the details, I try to get out as soon as I can. Sometimes I'm a little late because a lot of stuff's going on. But yeah, so that we can coordinate and we can be responsive and aligned together, not only to each other, but ultimately to God. Because God is the master planner. He's not just a planner. He's not just a master planner. He's really good at it. He is the master planner. He's got a plan for everything and everyone. Every molecule, every one of the 2 trillion stars plus, we can't see even more beyond that in the universe and beyond. Can you imagine the kind of wisdom, the kind of care and thoughtfulness and power that God has to be able to plan for all of this? This is the last sermon in the series that has been planned about reflecting on who God is, because you can't love him if you don't know him. And God wants us to know him. And so we've been going through different aspects of what is God like? What is in his character? What has he revealed and shared about us that he's saying, this is who I am. This is how you relate to me. This is what you can trust because I'm going to stay this way. And one of the beautiful parts about who God is he is a planner. He has planned ahead. It is an expression of his wisdom. It is an expression of his love. It is an expression of his faithfulness that he makes a plan and he keeps to it for our good. His good, but ultimately his good is for our good. This is the last in this sermon series. We've had some guest speakers come in and out as well. The next sermon series actually is going to be about, it's going to be titled Commune, Walking Closely with God. It's not enough to know about him. We want to know him. We want to walk closely with him. That's what he wants. And so we're going to talk about that. How do we get close to God? How do we walk close to God? How do we stay close to God more and more? You'll be surprised. We've just scratched the surface of the kind of depth and meaning and joy of a relationship with God. And I think we're going to try to do that more and more as the time goes by. But that's the next sermon series. And the series after that, we're going to be talking about living in community and 4 aspects of how to do this well, how to do this in a sustainable way, in an enriching kind of way. The sermon series is called Nourishing Community. So that'll take us all the way, with one guest speaker, all the way to Thanksgiving. Just giving you a heads up, there's plans ahead as well. But as we're supposed to hear from Jeremiah 29:11. This was the verse that didn't get read, and that's my fault, by the way. So here is the verse that was one of the verses that's highlighted for today. God is saying to the people, his people who are in exile, who are wondering, what happened? Why did we arrive here? I thought, God, you were good, and now we are enslaved in a foreign place. And he's saying, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for welfare. This is a bad translation, right? God doesn't have plans for you to be on welfare, right? It's saying plans for your good and not for your evil, to give you a future and a hope. Okay? So this is given to a people at a time when they think God screwed up. They think God either was not powerful enough, he was not good enough. They don't understand that, in fact, even this exile, even this punishment that he was talking about, even this experience was not to harm them, but that, in fact, even through exile, okay, if you were scooped up, brought to a different country, and made to work as a slave, you'd be wondering, God, where are you? And that's what they're feeling. But God is saying, this is not the end. This is still a part of the grander plan, and that plan is for good. And he's saying, seek the good of the city, okay? Stay, build, don't just give up, actually thrive, because ultimately he's going to bring them home. I know the plans I have for you. God has plans. They are not to harm. They are not to abandon, but in fact, to give us a future and a hope. God always has a plan. The second verse that we read is from Romans chapter 8:28. And this is ultimately a verse that's kind of triumphant, kind of all-inclusive. It's very hard to dig your teeth into. It says, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. That's a lot. All things. 2 words, right? 2 words to describe everything. That's a lot. It seems kind of cliche. It seems kind of like too easy to say. And we know that for those who love God, all things, they work together for those who are called according to his purpose. In fact, oftentimes when we think about this, maybe you've heard somebody try to share this with you, okay? You just lost your job. And somebody quotes Romans 8:28. Don't worry, it's going to work out for your good. It's true, but it's hard to hear, right? I remember people trying to share and encourage me after I lost my daughter. And this verse would pop up. And I would say, yes, I know, but I don't feel it. I don't feel it. And I would say, God, is this true? I would talk to him. And I say, why would you allow all this to happen to us, to me and to my wife and to my daughter and to us? And I said, I don't understand. I'm grateful that nobody tried to shove this down my throat. Yeah. Pastors know, of course. And yet, when I was able to take my breath a little, catch my breath a little, and talk with God, and begin to try to see what's going on, I realize this is still true. He tells me, yes, this is still true. If it wasn't, we'd be in big, big trouble. Sometimes we need to remember these truths about what's called the providence of God. Providence, anybody heard that language before? Okay, if you read the Puritans, it's everywhere in the Puritan writing. It's a big thing. We've given up on that. We don't talk about providence as pretty much God, who is in control of everything, is orchestrating, choreographing, moving things around toward a plan that is for our good. We can't see it all the time. The movements are too big, or we don't see the connections. It doesn't feel like it oftentimes. But instead, when we remember these truths that God is a planner and hold on to the reality that there is a providence, okay, it makes a difference. Jerry Bridges says, we must say that providence is God's orchestrating all events, all circumstances in the universe and in our lives for His glory and for the good of His people. If we give up on this one, guess what? It's going to be extremely hard to know God, to walk with Him, to have faith. But the Scriptures not only remind us and help us to understand, this is a doctrine that's pulling together all the truths of Scripture, but they give us stories to actually show us, see, even when it looked like it was just random, or it was the enemies that were winning, or if just the bad things and the worst things that are happening and in a greater cycle, that God is not present and He is not good. It's the stories that remind us God even uses the wrong of others, even uses the ups and downs, the windy trails, ultimately for His good and ultimately for ours. An example of this is the story of Joseph. We went through, actually, Joseph's story a couple years ago, and it's a powerful, powerful story. It starts off with Joseph, giving dreams that he's going to be somebody of significance. All his brothers and even his parents would bow down before him. He's going to be given leadership. And you would have thought, if God had a plan to build him into a world-class leader with world-class influence, that in fact he would just be shooting up, right? He'd just be going to a better place and better place, promoted, getting better options and so on and so forth. But instead, what does his brothers do? They sell him into slavery. His own brothers. Can you imagine that? Your own family. When you experience betrayal, it hurts proportional to how close they are to you. And if your own family betrays you, it really hurts. His brothers sell him. They were going to kill him, but instead they just sell him. And he's stuck in this house. And you see him actually rising up the ranks because there's skill there. There is a good attitude there. He is actually shining, the cream rising to the top. And then out of a place of injustice, he's accused of raping the Potiphar's wife. And so he gets thrown into prison. Yeah, from slavery to prison, right? So you would think, wait a minute, he's going the wrong way. How is he going to become this kind of leader? In prison, he looks like he actually has more than simply the administrative gifts, because he's given the role of, basically, choreographing all of the needs of the prison. He's got spiritual gifts, right? He's able to not only receive dreams of God, but interpret other person's dreams. And as he's interpreted these other person's dreams, it comes out to be true, but the guy who benefits from it forgets. And you're like, God, that's mean. That's like you're teasing him, right? You're telling him, I'm going to make you a world-class leader, and you're sending him down this path. What are you doing, God? But you know the story. In a massive overturn, Pharaoh has a dream, and the dream nobody can interpret it. And so the guy who was in the prison and who benefited from actually Joseph's dream interpretation says, I know a guy. And then Joseph's brought up, and Joseph is able to interpret the dream, and he's elevated to the second most powerful person in the greatest superpower of the time, which is Egypt. all for the sake of not only all of his family coming back, but all of Israel and all of Egypt to be able to survive the famine that is coming. It's like Hollywood could never come up with a story this beautiful and this powerful, ultimately. But if you look at Joseph reflecting on his life afterwards, okay, after forgiving his brothers, he says this interesting thing. As for you, his brothers, who betrayed him, who were going to kill him, but sold him into slavery, you meant evil. His brothers' actions, they still made a difference. They had consequences on him, okay? You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. They had a plan to destroy him, to get rid of him, but God had a different plan. Whose plan won out? Yeah? And it wasn't simply for Joseph and his life. It was for all of these people. God's good was for not just his own family, but Israel was going to live and going to be forwarded. It was all a part of God's plan. Okay? Providence tells us and helps us to understand that life, this is John Piper, is not a straight line leading from one blessing to the next and then finally to heaven. It doesn't work like that. Okay? And anybody told you, they were lying, right? You're going to be wondering, God, where are you? What's going on? Why? And not be able to put some of those pieces together except for the fact that God is trustworthy and he says, I got a plan. It's for our good. Life is a winding and troubled road. Anybody who's lived will be able to say, Switchback after switchback. That's what roads are like when you're climbing and you're not going straight up and climbing. That's what I try to do in Maine. You're going up a path that goes like this and back and forward and back and forward and back and forward. You're like, you lose your sense of direction. But actually you're climbing. Switchback after switchback. And the point of biblical stories like Joseph and Job and Esther and Ruth is to help us feel in our bones, to know it. Not just know it in our heads. That God is for us in all these strange turns. God is not just showing up after the trouble and cleaning it up. He is plotting the course and managing the troubles with far-reaching purposes for our good and for the glory of Jesus Christ. This is his way of describing what providence means. Okay? God working for our good. Even sometimes when we can't see it. Even especially at times when we don't feel it. That's when we have to feel it in our bones. It's hard to see what God is doing. And so I love this quote by one of the Puritans. Providence of God is like Hebrew words. And if you've ever read Hebrew, you go from right to left. It's backwards, not left to right. Okay? It can only be read backwards. What does that mean? In the middle of it, you can't see what God's doing. Only afterwards. Oh, that's why. Oh, I needed that to become stronger. I needed that time to develop. I needed that to actually learn how to trust God, to hear his voice. Oh, it's only afterwards that oftentimes we are able to see the providential hand of God at work. We see this in Jesus' life all throughout. Who would have thought that this carpenter turned rabbi actually would save the world? Look at his story. Is he going from heights to heights to heights? No, yes. I mean, yes, his message and his personhood goes viral, but the more attention he gets, the more attack he receives. Ultimately, even being crucified on a cross unjustly. Who would have thought, as Jesus is hanging on a cross, that this was all a part of God's plan? Yeah. Anybody who is in a, as we understand it, like the electric chair, right? Nobody thinks God's behind this, and this is all a part of God's plan for his good and for his glory, right? That's what the cross is like, right? Try to understand that. But the third chapter of Genesis, you see God is already planning. He's revealing. He's already planned this out, but he's revealing a little. Right after they sin, talking about the woman, he says, yes, this is what's going to happen. There's going to be a judgment to soften your heart. But ultimately, God is going to do something to actually, right now, Eve and the snake, they are buddy-buddy. They are on one side. They are fighting against God. But he says, I'm going to do something. I'm going to switch everything around. I will put enmity between you and the woman. He's talking to the snake. I'm going to separate you two. You're simpatico right now against me, but I'm going to pull the woman out and her seed. And in this warfare, in this fight, between you, her, and her offspring and yours, he will crush your head and you will strike his heel. Do you realize this is actually talking about Jesus and what's going to happen to Jesus in Genesis 3? Right after they sin. It's not like God, like, oh, I'm so shocked and surprised that this would happen and I don't know what to do now. He's actually knew and he had a plan. He had a plan to send his own son right from the beginning. We see echoes of this even through Abraham's life, okay? You know the story of Abraham? At the end of his life, when he finally has a miraculous child after 25 years, the thing that he wanted the most, and then God actually says, take your son, okay, your probably 14, 15-year-old son, and sacrifice him on this mountain, Moriah. And Abraham, who's learned to trust God through all of the winding turns of his life, early that morning he goes. And he goes up the hill with his son, and the son is looking at him like knowing the culture at the time. Because at the culture at the time, if you want to get right with God, you want benefit from God, you have to sacrifice your son. That was all the culture at the time in the place that they were living. So Isaac, knowing, says, Dad, I see the wood. I see the fire. Where's the sheep? Right? Now, basically he's saying, are you going to sacrifice me up on the mountain? Abraham's response is, don't worry. Yeah. He says to his servants, we're going to go up and going to come down. I know God has a plan. He would not just give me this son and then take him from me. One way or another, whether it's through resurrection, one way or another, I'm going to trust him. They get up there. Isaac is bound on the wood, and the fire's there. And to the last minute before his hand comes down, Abraham's like, I trust. And that moment, God says, now I know you fear me. Now I know you know me. Right? And there's this beautiful thing that Abraham says, because he's come to this awareness. He's felt it in his bones that God is good, and all of this is for our good. Afterwards, having seen the ram caught in the thicket, okay, guess what? As he turns, there's a perfect sacrifice just waiting there, planned and prepared, that Abraham does not have to sacrifice his son. God already prepared an alternate sacrifice. And so Abraham, reflecting on this, says, he called the name of that place, that mountain, Yahweh will provide. Okay? In Hebrew, it's Yahweh Yireh. Have you heard of Jehovah Jireh, my provider? Right? That song, it is the old version of actually pronouncing this, but this is probably the new Hebrew scholars' way of pronouncing this language. The name that was given, Yahweh Yireh, is the Lord provides. The Lord provides. It's Genesis chapter 22. But the word for provide actually has its root of the Lord sees. Okay? In other words, God saw the need way in advance, and he prepared. He provided. God saw the need and saw to it that need would be provided for Abraham's good. Now, by the way, because of this story, there is no history of authorized Israelites out of confusion killing their own sons to gain favor with God. Only the kings like Manasseh, who were in blatant rebellion, thumbing their nose against God, did this. But there was never any confusion. God would never ask you to do this. It was a point of absolute clarity going forward. Okay? So God used that to the benefit of many. But there's a little hint here. The Lord will provide. He named the mountain, Moriah, Yahweh Yireh. God has seen the need in advance, and God has already seen how to provide it, and he's perfectly placed that provision. On the mount of the Lord, it will be provided. Do you know what Mount Moriah is? That's the very threshing floor that David purchases. That's Jerusalem. That's where basically that's where Jesus dies. Okay? That very mountain is where Jesus, God, gives up his own son. He doesn't ask for yours or mine. He gives up his own son to provide for our salvation. He's planned this from the beginning. When the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his son. This is the amazing thing. We would have never imagined that Jesus on the cross was a part of God's salvation. Never. Nobody did. God, in his loving plan of salvation, he prepared not only for our salvation, but he prepared for our restoration afterwards. Matthew 25, 34. The king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world." It's not some accident. It's something he has planned from before the world was created. Ephesians 1:4 says, "As he chose us in him," that's in Christ, "before the foundation of the world." These are constant reminders that God has a plan. Not just to save us and bring us to heaven, but every part of our life. It's not God planning to control us, to manipulate us like a puppet. It's a good Father planning ahead, knowing our life is going to go up and down, twirl around, and we're going to be confused. He's put things already in advance for us to thrive, for our good. The psalmist says this. He's not bothered by God already figuring out his life in advance. He says, "Your eyes saw my unformed substance. You made me inside my mother's womb." My mom, they might have had a plan, but they didn't know how to even make me. You made me as I am. In your book were written every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there were none of them. In other words, God wrote the psalmist's life. There's this deep recognition. Oh my gosh. Not only am I not an accident, every part of my life is a part of your plan for my good and for God's glory. "I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for your good, not for your evil, to give you a hope and a future." Yeah? To a point where Paul says, not only does he have a plan, but he is going to execute it. It's a good thing to have an idea of what you want to do. There's another thing to have the mettle, to have the grit, as hard as it is, to see that plan finalized. And that's what Paul's saying of God. "And I'm sure of this, that he who began a good work, who started off and had a plan, he will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ." That means no matter how often our plans go awry, okay, every couple, almost every couple, when they get married, they think, "I'm going to have a beautiful marriage," okay? And then life happens. Every parent, "I'm going to be such a good father. I'm going to try to be such a good father." And then you look around and you go, "Oh my gosh, what happened?" Right? Everybody has a good plan. And sometimes after a while, we find that realizing our inability, we get depressed. We lose our hope. All of this is not to say God is going to pull you around with his dominance and control. He's basically saying, despite your ability or my ability to see a good plan come forward, he will expend all of his wisdom, all of his love, all of his power for a good greater than we would have imagined for ourselves. And so God is a planner. And because he is, what does it mean to walk with God, to become like him? It's also to plan. Not apart from him, Not, "I'm going to do this because I want to and I don't care about what you say, God." But actually, our planning is looking to align with God's planning. If you know God's plan, you align your life toward that. All of our plans that doesn't fall in line with God's master plan it is just a waste of time. Yeah? You go to Irvine and you build a building and you find out, wait a minute, this is not according to plan. They'll demolish it, right? And it wasn't the planner's fault. It's because oftentimes we don't align with God's plan. We butt up against it. We fight God versus trusting and aligning our plans. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in Him. He will act. God will enact His plan. But in trust, we get to commit to His ways. Commit your work to the Lord. And as we do that, as we align, we find our plans, we're given the grit and the resources, actually, to see them established. Think of it this way. Anybody take modern dance before? Okay. My wife made me take a class. I hated it, right? I was so bad at it, right? But ultimately, when you're doing modern dance, you have to be so attentive, okay? You got to watch what the leader's doing, and you have to feel as the leader leads, okay? So if the leader moves their hip this way, you do in response. You ever see two people that are like two left feet out on the dance floor? Yeah. It's because they're not paying attention to each other. Sometimes they're stepping on each other's toes, right? It takes a little time. But when you see two people who are completely aligned, it is gorgeous. Yeah. For you men who can't imagine what that must look like, you have to use football, right? When you got a plan, a game plan, and you got a plan, right? You know, Spider, Y, Z, whatever, 22. Guess what? When the quarterback knows the plan and throws the ball, and the wide receiver is off somewhere else, either it looks like, what is he throwing to? Or it's an interception, and it wasn't the quarterback's fault. He sent it right where it's supposed to be. It was the wide receiver who's not aligned. Or if the people on the ground are not aligned with the coach, it looks horrible. But when you see a team that is aligned, okay, even through the incredible difficulty, it's beautiful. That's how we get to live our lives, in alignment with God's plan. Martin Luther King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. What is he saying? He knows where this universe is going. So he's aligning his life and his plan toward that. Yeah. The arc of the universe is not just bending toward justice. It is hurtling toward salvation. We know Jesus is coming soon. And so we get to align with him or not. It should shape the way that we even pray. Our prayer shouldn't be, God, give me this, God, give me that. I don't care about somebody else. I just want this, I want this. It should be, God, what are you doing? Where are you moving? What is your bigger plan? How do I align with this now? Yes, we bring our hopes, our hurts, everything to him. But actually, when we pray out of this alignment, our prayers change. Tim Keller says, God will either give us what we ask, okay, or will give us what we would have asked for if we knew everything he does. Okay? In other words, which one would you rather have? God knowing everything, having a plan for everything, giving you good, or giving what you wanted, but it doesn't line up, right? Like, Daddy, I want just some ice cream. I want ice cream every day. Well, no, I'm going to put this money into this stock called Amazon for you in your name. I don't want no stupid Amazon stock. Yeah, 20 years later, oh, who cares about ice cream, right? If you only knew what God knows, you would want what he wants for you. If we knew what God knows, we would ask for what he wants to give. I'm going to finish with a story of a guy. I've shared his story before. His name is John Medina, and an incredibly smart man, had great parents. But when he became a father, and he was an academic, so he didn't have a lot of money, and so he started planning for his son's future. So he was off in the room thinking about, in 17, 18 years, his son is going to need to go to college, and college is expensive, and it's going to get more expensive. And they have to start saving up now. They have to start planning for his future, giving him experiences and environments, Boy Scouts, as well as these kinds of places, mentoring, and he's putting all this, especially the finances. And he's like, thinking about with his father's love, planning out the opportunities for his son's life. And in the other room, his son's screaming his head off because he's hungry. He said that his son had this kind of, he loses his mind because the hunger for food just grip him. And he would just put his hand on his hair and he would just start yanking his hair. It's like, why? Kids are like that. People are like that. They're so caught up in the fear of hunger, where's the milk going to come from, that they're hurting themselves. And so the father would go over to the room, John Medina would go over to the room and try to explain to us, and okay, I'm here. He would put his hand in between and rest his hands off from yanking whatever little hair he had on his head. And he would sing to him and he would feed him. All the while thinking, you have no idea what I'm doing right now, planning for your future. And as he was doing that, God was speaking to him. Do you have any idea what I've planned for you? How much thought, how much care, how much investment, what price I have and will pay